We're going to switch gears now and discuss the channel box and attribute editor. Those two areas of Maya are used quite often, so it's important to learn a little bit about them before we proceed to other steps. Now, before we can discuss those, we'll need to create some type of object for the scene. The easiest way to create an object in Maya is to create a primitive. In fact, there's an entire drop-down menu for that. If I go up to Create, click that, you'll see that I can create NURBS primitives, polygon primitives, and so on. So, for example, if I wanted to create a NURBS primitive sphere, I go to Create NURBS Primitives, Sphere. Now, by default, when I click this, Maya is going to expect me to click drag interactively in the View panel to determine where the sphere appears and how large it will be. This is true with the other primitives also. So if I click Sphere, my mouse is changed to a special X shape, and then I can click drag in the View panel to create the sphere. As I click drag, before I let go of my mouse, I can change the size. Wherever I click initially, that will be where the center of the sphere is located. When I let go of my mouse, the size is frozen. So there's a NURBS sphere. Now the sphere is rendered out in wireframe. Wireframe is a series of thin lines that represent where the sphere is in space, but doesn't really speak to how the sphere is going to be shaded or how it's going to render. But we'll get to the shading and rendering in future steps. So for right now, we'll just use the wireframe. Now before we can use the channel box or the attribute editor, we have to make sure the object is selected. Now I know this sphere is selected because the wireframe is green. However, if it was not selected, it would be dark blue like this. So if you have an object that is not selected or deselected, and you would like to select it, simply click on the object. So I'll click on the sphere in this case, and once I click on it, the wireframe turns green again to show me it's selected. I also know it's selected because there's information in the channel box. So what does the channel box do? The channel box displays transformation information for whatever is selected. In other words, what are the transforms for the object? And those are broken down to translate, rotate, scale, and visibility. For translate, rotate, and scale, those are further subdivided into X, Y, and Z, and that corresponds to the X, Y, and Z axis that Maya uses for its perspective view. In other words, those are required for the 3D space. So you can look at the channel box, and if you wonder where something is in space, it'll tell you. For example, the sphere currently has a translate X value of negative 0.8 or so. That means along the X-axis, the sphere is located at approximately negative 0.8. And as you can see by this, it can be positive or negative values. Each axis is a positive negative direction. Now, where that all starts is at the origin. The origin is right in the center of the Maya universe, which is the center of the grid. So the very center of the grid, that's 0, 0, 0 in Maya space. So for example, if you go straight up, that's in the positive direction along the y-axis. If you go straight down, that's a negative direction for the y-axis. X and Z also have a positive and negative direction. One direction will be positive, the other will be negative. In terms of rotate, this sphere is not rotated now, but if it was to rotate it, it would pick up other values that are not 0, 0, 0. So rotation just represents how many degrees the object is rotated along a particular axis. If you rotate the sphere along its virtual waist, so to speak, they'll pick up different values for the rotate Y. There's also scale in the channel box, and scale simply keeps track of how large the object is in 3D space. Now, since I just made this primitive, it has a scale of 1, 1, 1, but if it was to scale up in some modeling operation, those scale values would change in addition. So that's what the channel box does. It allows you to see what the transformation information is. Let's move on to the attribute editor. You can get to the attribute editor by clicking the attribute editor tab along the right of the window. And there's the attribute editor. You can always go back to the channel box by clicking the channel box tab. But we'll go back to the attribute editor for now. The attribute editor displays attributes for a selected object and also allows you to change the values of many of those attributes. Now often those attributes are broken up into tabs. Now even though I have a single NURBS sphere selected right now, I have multiple tabs. The leftmost tab holds the various transforms, the translate, rotate, scale, and so on. The second tab, to the right of the initial tab, is the shape tab. This contains attributes that affect how the surface was constructed, how many spans it has, or how many subdivisions, and so on. And there are additional tabs that will vary based on whatever you have selected. For instance, this has a construction history tab, and then additional tabs have to do with what material it's assigned to. Now we'll discuss various attributes and how they should be changed as we go through this series. Just keep in mind that if you do need to change an attribute, you do it through the attribute editor. So what is an attribute anyway? An attribute is simply a piece of information that determines how an object acts or how it exists in a Maya scene. In other words, how big it is, how small it is, what material it's assigned to, what color it is, how it's constructed, and so on and so on. There are many, many, many attributes, and we'll learn many of these as we go through this series.